After The Amazing Spider-Man 2, many people write off this villain, but that is a serious mistake, especially in the year of our Lord 2024. Electro's thing is electrokinesis, obviously. His body generates and stores electricity, and what is the world practically covered in the modern age? Electricity. Even people have like electricity in them. That's where Electro generates his powers from. He can also touch an exterior power source and become like a transformer, channeling that energy through himself to fight enemies. He can blast people with electrical bolts, resulting in frequently their termination. Electro can sense the electricity in machines, allowing him to override their systems, putting them under his control. It's not hard to see why this villain is a more serious threat now than ever before in an age where almost everything is run by a computer. Henry Gyrich is next, and he's human. That's it, he's just a guy, which leads many people to believe he would be an easy fight. But that could not be further from the truth. His power looks a bit different. His power lies in the government, or like that kind of brand of power. He heavily monitored superhumans and frequently tried to oppress communities. He also hates aliens, hates them. He kidnapped many aliens like Captain Marvel and Adam X. He was very adamant that aliens left Earth and just caused a bunch of problems. Then there was also everything that happened in the X-Men animated series with his character, including, spoiler, him blasting Professor X and causing severe injury. Just because you're a human doesn't mean you can't be a supervillain or absolute menace to society. Remember that. Bullseye deserves way more credit than he currently has. He is a daredevil villain, one of the big ones. Bullseye discovered he was really good at throwing to kill, so he made a career of it. First with baseball, then he got bored, purposely hit the batter, ended him. Then he became a freelance merc for hire, pretty much. He would consistently commit a crime, fight Daredevil, get arrested, and then get released. I don't understand it. Keep him in jail. At one point, he fought Deadpool and won, which is really impressive. That's quite hard to do. He was part of the Dark Avengers and once made himself go into cardiac arrest. Even though he was once declared insane, people still underestimate the lengths Bullseye will go to get what he wants. One of the last big things Bullseye has been involved in is Lockdown. He was captured and cloned but escaped, released his clones, and then started receiving visions from a divine being that said he needed to paint the town red, so he went through Manhattan with his clones and did exactly that. Thankfully, Daredevil stepped in again and Bullseye was arrested again. Alright, up next is the Sphinx. He started out as just a simple wizard, but then became wielder of the Cawstone and eventual cosmic class threat. The Sphinx found the stone, which quickly attached itself to his forehead, but it did come with a long list of pretty cool powers, including immortality, telepathy, flight, teleportation, illusion creation, and more. One of the underutilized powers in his abilities is to alter reality. He usually keeps it on the less dramatic side, but I say let it all loose and have some fun. Sphinx eventually grew tired of being immortal and decided to search for a way to get the stone off. He did so in a manner that gained the attention of the Fantastic Four, now dead set on stopping him. They called in Galactus, who defeated Sphinx, stripped him of his power, then sent him back in time in a time loop to live his life again and again. However, they forgot that Sphinx already existed at that time, so now there were two. Together, they developed a way to prevent his future fate. He almost succeeded using that in the future, but then he didn't. He lived on though and continued being the worst. He had a brief period where he was pretty chill, but right now he's back to his villain ways. Now we are looking at Hydro Man, the villain Spider-Man claims would be a serious threat if only he were smarter. The exact words he used were dangerous but dim. Some people write off Hydro Man simply because his power doesn't sound threatening. Oh, you can turn into water? Well, lame, this guy can teleport and cast illusions. But Hydro Man is a serious threat. His whole body turns to water, but he can make himself bigger by absorbing more water. He used to just be able to manipulate like his body water, but got some wizard modifications enabling him to control any water. In exchange though, the wizard can make him a puddle whenever he wants, so there is like some weakness here. That's a good thing. He can control all water. He could create tsunamis, or stick with me, what if he just absorbed all the water in the world and refused to give it back, making everyone die of thirst? I don't think that's possible, but it's Marvel, so like, you never really know. I just think it's funny Spider-Man thinks this guy has all the makings of a big bad supervillain, but is too stupid to handle it. Poor Morris. Alright, now we are looking at the one and only J. Jonah Jameson. Yes, I am being serious. Everyone knows that J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man. He has made that very clear, but people tend to underestimate the lengths this man will go to, and has gone to make Spidey's life harder or even try and end it. Likely people write him off mainly because the more popular versions of the character come from the movies, where he's more of just like a thorn in Spider-Man's side. But in the comics, he is a force to be reckoned with. He once hired Luke Cage to take out Spider-Man for $5,000 in the 1970s. That is about $35,000 today. He also was the one to commission Spencer Smythe to create the Spider Slayers, and then was one of the people to use those suits and try and defeat Spider-Man. Thankfully, the suits, they all had some sort of flaw that led to the plan failing, but still, it's the evil thought that counts. There has never been a hater like J. Jonah Jameson, and I fear there never will be again. Up next is, ironically, Overshadow. Barely anyone knows who he is, and yet he might be one of the most powerful villains Marvel has ever created. Overshadow got his powers from the White event. It gave people powers. And because Philip Nolan Voight was climbing a mountain when it happened, and was therefore the closest to space, he got the most power. He is able to replicate the powers of any paranormal he encounters. Not only that, he gets to keep those powers after he replicates them, and not only that, but he can then elevate the powers and magnify them. How does he not win every fight? I suppose it's not about how much power you have, it's what you do with it, but still. The only power he could not replicate, which ended up being his undoing, was the powers of the Star Brand. That's the only one he couldn't overshadow. Up next is a villain that I am personally obsessed with, Stained Glass Scarlet. She is a Moon Knight villain, and I think stays alive by sheer force of will. Not really. She lives as long as someone worships her. She was originally just a human, but that doesn't mean she wasn't a threat to society then. Scarlet is underestimated because she never actually trained for any fighting or anything. She was just a woman who was willing to take her life into her own hands and used violence to do it. If you just view her like that, yeah, she would be an easy knockout. However, people latched onto her story and turned her into a god. People started worshipping her, praying to Stained Glass Scarlet for vengeance against their enemies. They turned her into a story, meaning she is now someone that will not die until no one believes in her. In her god form, she nearly defeated Moon Knight until he called on Khonshu, a much older god, by extension more powerful. So she did get defeated, but not really, because she still has followers. She might be a once human made of glass, but that doesn't mean she won't break you. On to the last one, spotlight on Graviton. He gained the ability to mentally control gravity after a failed teleportation experiment. At first, when Graviton started being evil, no one really knew because his lab was in the Canadian Rockies, but then someone sent a distress signal to the Avengers, so they got involved. But here's the thing, the Avengers thought that this was going to be routine. Easy win for them, the guy was just a human, right? Wrong. Graviton literally threw the Avengers around and won. He won the fight. He ended up destroying himself by making a building collapse in on himself after a big emotional event, and it would take a while before he was able to separate all the atoms again. After that, he had amnesia, but eventually returned to a life of crime. Despite being literally unbeatable in Avengers 158, no one really knows about him. But that's it. That's all. See you next time. Bye!